How did Grandpa Abe come to the U.S.?
How did
Grandpa Abe come to the U.S.?
Oh, he came on a boat. He walked all the way from where he lived in Poland to Amsterdam, which in Holland or the Netherlands. And over there, he started selling things, buying things and selling them in order to get money to pay for the boat ride to America. But he didn't have enough money, so he just went on the boat anyway. And the boat ended up in New York, I think, and they sent him back to Europe. So he was back in Holland, and he did some work and he made enough money to take another boat. But that boat was coming to Canada, not United States. So it came to Canada, and he got off in Canada, and then he came across the border in Detroit with a bunch of Canadian workers who were working for General Motors and Ford in Detroit. And nobody knew that he was not one of the workers. So that's how he ended up in Detroit. And once he was in Detroit, he had a telephone number to call of a relative in Chicago. And he called that relative, and the relative said, "Come to Chicago. We have work here for you." And they did. And he came.
Can I add to it? Well, I can add a little bit because he came over one afternoon when Joe was like 2.5 years old and Eddie was the baby. And he came over really to see them, but they were asleep. They were taking naps. So he started to tell me, he said to me, "I'll tell you how I came to America. I didn't have any money, and I had no one to sponsor me. In order to come to America in those days, you had to have somebody to vouch for your character."
What year?
It was right after the First World War, so let's say it was around 1919, 1920, something like that. And he didn't have anybody to vouch for him, to attest to his character. So he knew the only way he could get here would be illegally. And so he snuck on board the first boat that he could find, and he hid down below where they wouldn't find him. And then he came, when the boat landed at Ellis Island, he got off, and they started going through all the passengers' names, and they couldn't decide who he was. They found out that he was illegal, so they put him back on the first ship going back, and because he was illegal, they threw him in jail. And he was in jail for close to 6 months, and he didn't know what to do. He knew he only wanted to come to America. So what he ended up doing was he had hidden some money away somewhere on his body, maybe in a sock, maybe inside his shirt. Somewhere he hid some money away. And while he was in jail, he bribed a guard who used to walk back and forth guarding the jail cells. And he bribed a guard and said, "I have some money. If I give it to you, you go to the town and you buy silk stockings and anything else you can find and sell it on the black market. And we'll split the profit." So he trusted this guard to do that. The guard did it. He brought him back money, and they split the profit. With that money, he saved to buy a regular ticket to come back to America. This time he wasn't going to get on board the ship illegally. This time he was going to have a ticket and he was going to come the right way. But this time he wasn't going to go to Ellis Island, which is where all the immigrants went. He decided to go to Canada. When he got to Canada, he couldn't figure out how is he going to get to America. And how they didn't send him back, I don't know, but he decided that he would just get on a train and take a train as close as he could get to America, which was Detroit in Ontario. So he took this train to Ontario, which is right across the river from Detroit, which is in the USA, which is in Michigan. And every day he would watch the auto workers going across the bridge from Canada into the United States. And he watched how they did it. And this is what he said to me. I watched, everybody had a jacket, and I said to myself, I have a jacket. Everybody had a cap, and he said, I have a cap. Everybody had a lunch pail, but he didn't have a lunch pail. So he went and got himself a lunch pail, and he got himself a newspaper. And he imitated the way the workers would walk across the bridge. Take the jacket, raise the collar, pull down the cap, put the paper underneath your arm, carry your lunch pail. And he said to me, and now I walk to America. And that's how he came. Nobody questioned him. When he got to America, he went to the first telephone, called up his relatives in Chicago, and said in Yiddish, Ich bin da, which means I am here. Wie kann ich kommen zu dir? How can I come to you? And they explained what train to take and how to come to Chicago. And that's what he did. He went to Chicago, he went to their apartment, and he slept on a table in the kitchen. And that's how Grandpa Abe came to Chicago and the USA.
What did you find in his wallet?
Several years later, after he was married, he came running into the house to Grandpa's mother and said, don't worry, we're legal. Which meant he found a newspaper article that said all immigrants that came to this country prior to, I think it was 1921, are declared legal. Because he always worried. He really was not legal. He didn't have anybody to vouch for him. He didn't have any papers. He didn't have a passport. Nothing. And he always worried that they would find him and ship him back to jail in Europe. So when he died, we found this article in his wallet. Yellow and crumbling and dated. It was so precious to him.